It's Friday, January 11th. Let's talk PlayStation. Alright, so we're going to start off this PlayStation News Week with perhaps something that I think is just pretty humorous given what it is, but recently somebody on Twitter noticed that there was a new movie on Netflix, and if you look at the banner imagery for the movie, it looks suspiciously like something else, doesn't it? I find this pretty humorous because this is so unabashedly copying The Last of Us's main box art, and there's just really no shame whatsoever, and I would have to assume the premise of the film is somewhat close given the box art. I didn't see the film certainly, but I found that very interesting, and Neil Druckmann even responded to it too, which is also pretty funny. Now, another quick story I wanted to mention real quick was that somebody remade PT in Unreal Engine, and it looks fantastic. I mean, it looks very similar to the original PlayStation 4 demo. Of course, if you don't remember, PT was that Silent Hills playable teaser we saw a few years back, a collaborative experience between Kojima and Guillermo del Toro. Konami was the publisher. Of course, that fell through. Kojima moved on, made his own studio, now doing Death Stranding with Guillermo del Toro. So that's, of course, the quick history lesson there. But PT was still great, and I still love PT for a number of reasons. I think it's pretty obvious why. It's such a small experience, but it was so horrific at the time, and it was surprising because Sony kind of sneakily announced it on stage. I believe it was during E3 or Gamescom, and nobody knew what it was until somebody finally beat it, and it was somebody that inadvertently beat it on Twitch, and we saw that kind of cool little ending with Norman Reedus in there, and it was very cool. So it's nice to see that people are so dedicated to making it live on in the future. Okay, now another Quantic Dream story. It's going to be really fast because it's essentially just more fuel to the fire, which is that Quantic Dream does have something to announce within this year of 2019. So studio head David Cage sent out a tweet basically saying we have exciting plans in 2019. So that's kind of at least a good little timeline there, right? Because obviously they just wrapped up their game, right? So you would have to figure any sort of exciting news would take years for them to announce because it would probably be a new game. The company's been open about them not wanting to do DLC or explore certain avenues like that of smaller content or smaller scale released games. They don't typically do that, and they've been open about that. But from what they're saying and the way they keep kind of wording this, it makes it seem like the company may have changed their opinion a little bit. Maybe we'll get some Connor DLC for Detroit Become Human. I know a lot of people are kind of holding out for something like that, and FYI, in that tweet, I do really like that Connor plush, and I really wish I could buy it. Now, developer Ready at Dawn, they have some new job listings, and it's for a third-person AAA new IP. Why is this important? Well, of course, because Ready at Dawn has a long history with PlayStation. Their most recent release with Sony was The Order 1886. Prior to that, they did a lot of PSP IPs, so they would do God of War, Daxter, PlayStation IP, but they would do the portable versions of those. And, you know, they were great games. They actually had a very good track record, and doing something like The Order was a much different experience for them because it was such a higher caliber of a project, right? The visuals were so much more than what they are used to. Of course, it was a larger scope of a game, and it was actually quite impressive what they pulled off with The Order 1886 in terms of visuals. I still stand to this day that The Order is one of the most visually impressive games on the market, and that game came out in 2015. But it was a game kind of lacking a lot of gameplay, you know, it kind of had a lot of issues in that area. And it wasn't a bad game by any stretch. I stand by that it was a somewhat enjoyable experience. Certainly if you're the kind of person that can go out and buy it for $5, $10, and if you're looking at the game today, that's pretty much what you're looking at right now is a $5, $10 game, so it's not a bad buy. But they still have their own sort of issues, right? So this is kind of interesting to see them explore this again. And now it's a new IP, so it won't be The Order, but it's just a situation of, is this maybe another thing that Sony might look into? Will they, you know, because they need a publisher. Will Sony be the publisher for this game? And I don't know, given the fact that Sony obviously didn't explore a sequel to The Order, so I don't know if Sony's quick to give Ready at Dawn a second chance. The history's there, so maybe they took a vertical slice of this game, showed it to Sony, and it was good enough for them to finally back it, or maybe it's going to be a multi-platform game, which they probably need to do because the developer, I don't want to say they're on hard times, certainly, but, you know, their last few projects have been very hit and miss. So we'll see what this one turns out to be in the coming years of whenever they announce it. Now, this next news story, it's not totally related to PlayStation, but certainly I found it to be breaking news and pretty large, so I wanted to talk about it. But if you didn't see, just yesterday it was announced that Bungie is leaving their publisher Activision, which is pretty substantial news, certainly. And it's also substantial because I believe they had a long-term contract well beyond what has happened, so this is certainly a premature decision of them leaving Activision. And as far as I know, there's actually been some pretty hefty tensions there between Activision and Bungie, and this is quite often when it comes to a semi-big developer like Bungie. Well, Bungie is very big, and a very big publisher like Activision, which is that, you have this kind of not necessarily friendly camaraderie. Activision is a big publisher giant that wants not only microtransactions or heavy monetization in a continually updated online game like Destiny, but they also want annualized portions of this game. So they want certain DLCs or expansions released on a yearly basis, which is something that Bungie doesn't really want to do or has no interest in doing, or certainly doesn't want to feel rushed. That's kind of the big thing, right? And Bungie isn't without fault in terms of the quality of some of the content they've released over the years. Now, I don't play Destiny myself. I played the first game maybe 50, 60 hours. I didn't really get into the second game all that much, so I can't really speak totally for the quality of the game, but I can certainly see what fans are saying. People really enjoy Forsaken, so that was kind of good to see Bungie release a piece of content that was substantial and people really enjoyed it, and so they kind of know the right direction they want to go in. But they are a big developer, and I think they're pretty happy about the fact that they are on their own now, and they get to retain their own IP, and they get to do whatever they want. I mean, that's really the sort of dream when it comes to being a developer. It's owning your own IP, but also kind of doing what you want and doing your own timetable and having a publisher that will properly represent you and take care of you. Which is why we often talk about how Sony, time and time again, seems to be that kind of publisher that lets developers have their sort of time and space with their games, and they don't necessarily rush them for those deadlines. Sony will give them that time if they need it. But with Activision, it's interesting because they certainly were probably hammering down some pretty heavy deadlines for Bungie, but at the same time, here's the thing. If Bungie is going to be self-publishing in the future, which apparently they are doing as it stands right now, that's going to be, I guess interesting for lack of a better word. Publishing's not easy. There's a reason why almost every game always has a publisher. The publisher takes care of marketing rights, your PR, distribution rights, I mean, everything. It's a whole crew of people that you need. And so Bungie's going to have to bring on a lot of staff if they're going to actually do this in-house, or maybe they'll contract it out. I would assume they'd do that. I mean, but they've got the capital for it too, is the thing. That's why what I'm saying is Bungie is a big enough developer where they kind of can stand on their own feet right now. It's just a matter of, how well that will work. I think it's good news, but you should kind of maybe be a little cautiously optimistic moving forward. They are also starting another project that's not Destiny, so that may be a new IP or something, which is cool. I mean, they're a good developer. They can release really great games. It's just a matter of, we've seen this a lot where certain developers will go independent, or they've had a long history with a particular publisher, and then they go on their own, right? And it seems like there's a certain trend of them releasing a game and then it doesn't turn out all that well, or the sales are quite poor, and it's like a necessary evil. You sometimes need a publisher. So we'll see what happens with this particular scenario. So this next news story I didn't really see coming, but at the same time, you look at this and you think, well, sure, this is probably in Sony's best interest. This past week, Sony announced that they acquired audio company Audio Kinetic, which is this sort of cross-platform audio solution company that does a lot of audio stuff. They have this software called Wise, which, as far as I know, many developers in the games industry use this software to work on the audio in their games, and this software will provide a number of things for game developers. It's this tool that, again, it's dialogue, it's mapping sounds, the sounds are on the player, just this, that, and the other, right? All the audio technicality of the video games, I mean, that's sort of like what the software will do. It's a tool for developers. I would have to imagine this is now residual revenue for them, now that they are going to be seeing some revenue out of this licensing fee that they're going to be doing for many developers across not just Sony's developers now, but many developers. But also maybe they could work on some more proprietary tools that are just for Sony's games or something. Or this may be just a situation where they buy up a company and then let it sort of work out independently for the long term, and they just sort of, pocket the cash over and over for years to come. Who really knows? But Sony Interactive Entertainment President and CEO John Codera had this to say in regards to the acquisition. He said, "A rich and all-encompassing audio experience is increasingly critical to the overall gaming experience, further enhancing immersion and emotion for the player. Audio Kinetic is a prominent provider of audio solutions for the gaming industry, and we are confident that this acquisition will allow us to further grow the PlayStation platform and contribute to the broader gaming industry. It's our goal to support Audio Kinetic's efforts to advance its audio technology while maintaining independence and platform neutrality." So what that quote means is basically what I'm kind of getting at. They're probably going to do some proprietary stuff for PlayStation, but platform neutral, they're certainly going to license this out to every developer if they're willing to pay, because it's a software tool that many people use. So I guess that was certainly a good idea for Sony. So a recent job listing at Naughty Dog gives us a little bit of insight into the multiplayer of Last of Us Part 2, which, cool, because we don't really get many details about the multiplayer mode for the game, because it will have one, we do know that much. And if you remember back in 2013, we didn't really get any details about the Last of Us original multiplayer right up until the game pretty much came out, more or less. It was more of a surprise near the end. We got a little bit of footage, game comes out, and then we find out it's actually quite fun and very enjoyable. I enjoyed it a lot too, and it's tough for me to get into a multiplayer game. But this job listing, apparently the person taking this title is required to, it basically says, you will usher players through the entire multiplayer experience, from first login through matchmaking, and then granting rewards players can use to customize their characters in the store. Now that's not a whole lot of detail, certainly, but at the very least we know it's going to be like the original Last of Us, which is that there is going to be a store where you can presumably purchase content, which is that entirely surprising. This could get very long-winded of a conversation because it gets into this sort of minutia of pay to win and buying a weapon or two. I believe that was kind of a heated topic a few years back when The Last of Us did that. So, it's not major news, but at the very least we can go off the fact that it's very much so going to be like the previous game. Now, on the topic of The Last of Us Part 2, we also do have a semi-rumor. I mean, take it with a grain of salt for what it is, but ex-IGN employee Alana Pierce was on Twitter, and she replied to a few fans, and she basically said that The Last of Us Part 2 is due for 2019, and she said that from what she knows, from what she's heard from multiple people, she consistently hears that it's 2019. And now she doesn't work at IGN anymore. She works at, she's a content creator at the Funhouse YouTube channel. But the thing you got to keep in mind is that when you hear details and things like this from somebody previously from IGN, or if they're from Kotaku or Game Informer or whatever game news outlet that you might know about, whether you like them or not, the thing you have to understand is that these people are very close to the industry. They have many industry contacts, and it's not outside the realms of impossibility for them to hear rumors like this. And it's not even much of a rumor when you sort of have somebody very close to the project, many people from the project, or many people outside of the project that consistently know that the game is due for 2019. And you always have to keep in mind that every developer working on a game has an internal release date, and they're not trying to release that publicly until they know that they're going to hit it confidently. So, as I had said in my predictions video, I feel that they do have an internal target of holiday 2019. They're not going to tell us until they confidently know that they are going to hit that. I'm sure they learned their lesson from Uncharted 4, which saw a few delays certainly. So, I think Naughty Dog, like many developers, is starting to learn that you keep that date internal. You do not release it until you know you're like at the very least 6 months out, because we don't have even a release window for The Last of Us technically. So you'd have to figure in the next few months we might get a new trailer or something that tells us that the game is going to hit 2019. But of course, things could still change, much like Alana said in her tweet, so keep that in mind. Now let's talk about sales. PlayStation 4 is over 90 million units sold. So Sony just this past week confirmed where PS4 is in terms of numbers, and I'll just read you a quote that Sony Interactive Entertainment President and CEO John Codera gave us all. He basically said, "Thanks to the continued support from our fans during the holiday season, we are pleased to announce that PS4 has reached 91.6 million units globally. We are also happy to announce that the monthly active users of PlayStation Network continues to show growth, and has surpassed 90 million as of November 2018. I would like to express my deepest gratitude to our passionate community around the globe and our partners for helping us achieve these milestones. This year, we will bring more enhanced experiences to our fans, along with a highly anticipated lineup of games that are only possible on PS4. As we look forward to the next PS4 milestone, SIE will continue to evolve, and we will further expand the platform to deliver the best interactive entertainment experiences to the world." Now, it was also released in these figures that Spider-Man sold 9 million copies, which is crazy. I cannot believe that game did so well. If you had asked me 6 months ago how well the game I thought would do, I would have said anywhere from 4 million copies at the most. So that's crazy that the game is doing so well, but Sony did also put a massive amount of marketing dollars into that game. But Spider-Man's a household name. People love Spider-Man. We've got so much going on with Spider-Man nowadays in terms of the movies and comic fans. I mean, it's quite obvious why the game did so well, and I think it's a more relatable character in terms of all the Marvel and DC properties that are floating around out there, so I guess that makes a lot of sense. But, I mean, 91.6 million, that is a lot, and, it really is a bit eye-opening because, quite honestly, we did that predictions video earlier in the week, right? That was my 2019 PlayStation predictions, and I'm still pretty confident about them. I feel that those things are going to happen this year. But when you look at PlayStation 4's continued success, you genuinely have to think to yourself, my God, there is zero reason right now to see a next generation platform. When you really think about it, the past 4 or 5 years now, it's been, 20 million units consistently every single year? I mean, that's nuts. It's barely going down a few million units every single year, right? And so for this year, I was going to predict that they were going to do maybe 16 million. So it's certainly a year-over-year decline, but it's still a lot of units. But my God, I mean, it's still not really stopping whatsoever, which sort of made me uptick my prediction a little bit to, I believe, 18 million units, or maybe it still worked out to 16. I already don't remember. But 91.6 is very impressive, and now you know with certainty that Sony is more than likely going to cross over the PlayStation in terms of worldwide sales. The original PlayStation was at about 100 million systems sold, maybe 101 if I'm not mistaken. I'm not entirely sure, but it's a moot point at this point. It's certainly going to cross over that, which is impressive. Now, I still do not think it will ever reach PlayStation 2 because that's another 50 million. At the very least, even if PlayStation 5 is announced in 2020, it's not going to sell another 50 million. If it does, I will eat my hat. I will be shocked beyond belief. But it is incredible to see how well PS4 is doing, and I don't know. I just didn't expect it, certainly. Now, what you can expect is Let's Talk Plus, our weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you could win a $10 PlayStation Network code. I'd like to congratulate Nils Hamren. You have won this week's Let's Talk Plus code. I will be contacting you very soon on Twitter to send you your $10 code. If you would like to win a $10 PSN code, it's very simple. We do this every single week on Let's Talk PlayStation. Follow the link down below to the Gleam website. You can subscribe on YouTube. You can follow on Twitter, follow on Twitch, this, that, and the other. Let me pay for your games. With that said, those are all the news stories I want to talk about with you guys from this past week. As I just mentioned, earlier in the week we did 2019 PlayStation predictions. So check that video out. It's going to be a good little precursor, right? Because a year from now, we will be judging that video, and I do think 2019 could still be a pretty crazy year. Admittedly, now that I see how well PS4 is doing, a small part of me is genuinely thinking, maybe we won't see PlayStation 5 this year. I'm still like 70% sure. That's at least what I'm leaning towards. I think it's about a 70-80% certainty, just based off the timeline of where we're at right now. But it's just, it is crazy. There really is no reason to see another machine. And the thing is, I've been one of the most adamant people of saying, like, well, they're coming. Like, they're definitely coming. And the thing is, maybe Microsoft at this point would be the one that would make the move first. But again, look at the timeline. Sony's skipping E3. They don't have much to show for the first 6 months of the year. You have to assume that there's certainly something very major. And we do have that recent PS5 rumor a few months back where it just seems like that's sort of what the timeline is shaping up to. And Sony would be doing a separate event and then a PSX 2019, but it remains to be seen. We'll actually be doing a video this coming, I believe I'll release it this coming Tuesday, but it's more or less, if you remember a few weeks ago, I did one where it was like why Sony should be afraid of Microsoft. We're going to do a reverse of that. Why should Microsoft be afraid of Sony? Because I think it goes without saying, but there's a good reason why Microsoft should be wary of Sony. I think that went without saying, but so many people got like annoyed with that video, but it's like, all right, well, there's certainly the other side of the story, so we'll do that actually. And that video is going to cover Sony's timeline currently. It's going to cover where the developers are right now and what we can expect, since most of them are doing PS4 projects, but the ones that aren't are surely doing PS5 projects. So you can see what the first year to 2 years might look like on PlayStation 5 in 2020 when the system will presumably launch. But you can expect that Tuesday. For now, I'm out of here. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.